Good morning. Hello, everyone. My name is Lacey, and today I want to discuss pollinator conservation challenges here in West Virginia. So I am a partner biologist with the West Virginia Division of Natural Resources and the USDA's Natural Resource Conservation Service. The main goal of this position is to help landowners create a successful pollinator habitat. While creating a successful pollinator habitat here in West Virginia can have a few challenges, I want to discuss how we can face those challenges, and maybe you all can share some ideas with me and how you think we should tackle some challenges or share some challenges that you all have noticed. So the biggest challenge that I have noticed here in West Virginia, and I imagine in the other states as well, is that oftentimes there is incomplete site preparation, which is unfortunate because this is a very crucial step for a successful pollinator habitat. For this to really work and save your time in the future, you need to make sure you are removing the competition fully at the beginning. So this oftentimes happens from either a delayed start in site preparation, ending a treatment early, or if you decide to go the route of soil solarization, you're either using the wrong type of plastic, not burying the edges, or not repairing rips or tears throughout the process. Another common challenge or issue a lot of landowners face is getting lured in with these bad seed mixes you find either in a hardware store or online. So what makes these seed mixes so bad is that oftentimes they are full of non-natives and annuals, and a lot of times they are full of fluff, like just garbage. So if you look at the seed mix here on the left, you see that this mix is 90% inert matter. So you are paying full price for only about 10% of seed. And that's only with an 85% germination rate. So you're not getting your bang for your buck. And then a lot of times these seed mixes do not have at least 3 species in each bloom period. So early, mid, and late. So a lot of these will only have blooms, in the mid or late, and they forget about the early, or it might just be early and late and not throughout the whole growing season. Sometimes people will get the correct, or a lot of times people do get the correct seed mix, or they will get the wrong or the correct, but either way, they will not seed in the appropriate seasons. You generally want to seed in the dormant seasons, so late fall, winter, or early spring to have the most success in germination. And then for folks that want to go either the potted plant route or plugs, here in West Virginia especially, we have a limited number of options of native plants or native plant nurseries. There's few in the area. The ones I'm generally familiar with are just outside of our state. Or if you can find a native nursery or just a local nursery, it's hard sometimes to find ones that are not treated with pesticides. Another challenge I hear a decent amount from landowners that over time there is a loss of diversity in their established pollinator habitat. So generally what's happening is that over time we are not monitoring for weed pressure, we are not encouraging diversity in the long run, and we are letting these invasive or aggressive species take over our pollinator habitats or pollinator plots. Another big challenge in our area, especially here in Morgantown, is that urban areas are often forgotten about. So there's little to no conservation efforts in the urban areas. Landscaping is often done with non-native species, like the stinky Bradford pear, the Japanese barberry, butterfly bush, English ivy, or just grass. A lot of times the HOA creates limitations on native landscaping because they view native plants as weeds or messy, which is not accurate, but unfortunately a lot of people view native plants that way because they're used to the tight and trimmy, non-natives. And then a lot of times we forget about how our forests are so beneficial for our pollinators. We forget that, we need to monitor our woodlands for these invasive species, take care of them whenever they're small enough to handle, and it's no longer a huge task. We forget that we need to limit deer browse. Deer play a very harsh role in the diversity of our herbaceous layer. They eat a lot, and unfortunately, they like our native species. It wouldn't be so bad if they enjoyed, the Japanese stiltgrass or a lot of our other aggressive invasives. They like our native stuff. And then we forget that maybe we should try to encourage native plant growth in our forest. Or sometimes we forget to think about pollinators in restoration or forest projects like riparian buffers, tree and shrub plantings. We want to try to add some flowering trees and shrubs when we can and when appropriate. Then another challenge here in West Virginia is that unfortunately conservation efforts are mainly focused on honeybees. Well, honeybees, are great. The honeybees are widely used and needed for crop pollination. But however, honeybees are non-native. And unfortunately, studies have shown that managed honeybee or managed bees in general can negatively impact native pollinators by consuming limited floral resources, and they can alter plant communities, which can alter biodiversity. And besides being non-native, honeybees are a social species. And of our approximately 4,000 native species in North America, 90% of those are solitary. So honeybees are not accurately representing our native bees. So how can we tackle all of these challenges? Well, let's go ahead and go over a few, and then maybe at the end, if you guys have some ideas, we can share those as well. So the best way to tackle our biggest challenge is to make sure we are having successful site preparation. We want to make sure that we are selecting a site preparation method that aligns with our capability, equipment to access, and time constraints. And then while we're doing whatever site prep method we select, we want to make sure we are monitoring progress throughout to ensure we will have successful results at the end, because we need to make sure that our competition is removed so we will have that success and less work later on. And then seed mixes. We want to make sure we are selecting appropriate seeds for our pollinator habitat. So we want to make sure, we are selecting those native plants, because native plants support native pollinators. We want to make sure we are selecting at least 3 species per bloom period, early, mid, and late. Myself, I like to have at least 10 in each bloom period because I like to have a very rich and diverse pollinator habitat, because each pollinator, desires something differently. They have different requirements, different needs. We have a lot of pollen specialist bees in our area, so we want to make sure we are providing something for them. And then we want to make sure we are still providing stuff for our generalists. And then our specialists, like the monarch butterfly, we will make sure we're having some milkweed for them to be able to reproduce. For our seed mixes, we want to try to limit our annuals and avoid the non-natives, and especially avoid the invasive species. It's okay to have some annuals in the seed mix, but we want to make sure that our mixes are not overwhelming with the annuals. We want our perennials and our natives. And then when we have our seed mixes or seed packets selected, we want to make sure that we are seeding in the appropriate seasons. We want to do it in either late fall, winter, or early spring, as most of our native seeds require periods of cold, wet, moist to be able to wake up from dormancy. And we'll have a lot greater success of germination in the spring if we seed in those time frames. All right, a challenge that I would love for us to tackle is to increase native plant availability. I think it would be awesome if we could create or increase partnerships to grow these native plants. I think it'd be awesome for, with our local nurseries, something for our universities. That would be a great class to make, growing natives 101, anything that would be beneficial to the community and our pollinator habitats. We could do them in schools, garden clubs, like whatever community or group that would want to help out with this would be great. And then if we could support our existing native nurseries or regular nurseries, but we should try to encourage or request these native plants. And we also want to make sure we are requesting pesticide-free plants. We do not want to purchase the ones that have neonicotinoids, because that will just disrupt all of the hard work that we are doing, because the neonics can leach from that potted plant into our soil and can be absorbed into our other plants that were untreated. And then we want to make sure we are encouraging and maintaining diversity in our already established pollinator habitats. So what we need to do, we need to monitor our plots and make sure there are no overly aggressive species taking over. We want to make sure we are definitely keeping the invasive species out. A great way to encourage diversity in the long run for a pollinator habitat is to do strip mowing. So what you do, you mow 1/3 of the pollinator habitat after successful establishment. So this is generally around 4 or 5 years after the initial setup, but don't put like a certain time frame on it. Just monitor your habitat. If you're seeing, oh, maybe the black-eyed Susans are kind of taking over, that's when you should start doing the strip mowing. So you do 1/3 that year, and then you do a different third the following, and then another third the next year, and then you start all over on the first strip all over again. All right, an easy way that everyone can help out our pollinators, especially, if you don't have, all the acreage, you live in the city, you have small space. What I would love to see happen if we could encourage those with the small spaces to grow a pollinator garden, either in our community, in your backyard, anyone can do this. You can even do them in pots if you don't have any actual green space. They will grow just fine in pots with a little extra love and water. We should try to resist mowing everything. I know it's in our nature to mow. We see tall grass. We're like, oh, I gotta mow it, but we need to help change that mindset. Not everything has to look, colonial. Like we can let some grass grow. It's okay. If we have, property that bumps up against a forest edge, maybe leave the forest edge, a little messier. Let some wildflowers grow. And then for landscaping, we should really start trying to aim towards native species. We should try to educate HOA on the benefits of native landscaping. Native plants generally require less or no maintenance in comparison to the non-native species. If we select the appropriate species for that environment, they will not need, the watering. They definitely will not need fertilizer because they are already adapted to our environment. So less work, less time, less other, supplies you got to do to keep it maintained. So that saves HOA money. So that's like a good selling point. And then something, all of us in the city or whatnot, we should help change the view of native plants. We should stop viewing native plants as weeds and messy, and we should view native plants for their beautiful, necessary part of our ecosystem, and they help support a lot of our pollinators, and they're beautiful. So let's help change the view on that. And then of course, we don't want to forget about our forests and our pollinators, because forests are just full of diversity. The trees and wildflowers found in these forests can support ample amount of pollinators. So whenever we're doing any type of restoration or any type of planting, we want to think about our pollinators, try to add some flowering trees and shrubs when appropriate. And, if they work with that environment, or if you can add some wildflowers that are native to that area, try to add a few, just keep our pollinators in mind. Or if you don't want to plant, just help keep the invasives under control or out of our woodlands. And then finally, let's try to focus conservation efforts on our native pollinators. Supporting our honeybees is perfectly okay, but let's try to prioritize our native pollinators. And so to do that, we want to select native plants for native pollinators, as native plants will support the entire life cycle and not just the end. So in conclusion, pollinator conservation in West Virginia has some challenges, but with a little fine tuning and help from the community, we can create a healthy pollinator habitat. For a successful pollinator habitat, site preparation must fully be completed. We need to seed at the right time, and we got to keep those invasive species out. And don't be afraid to utilize our urban areas and our forests to support our native pollinators. All right, that is all I have for you guys.